So you already anticipated my next question about abortion, and you argue fairly convincingly, I think, that the model of law as police officer has, for the most part, consumed the debate on abortion. Both sides sort of accept that model, and you propose law as teacher of virtue as a different way to advance the conversation. And I think you anticipated some of those arguments. You spend a chapter talking about the Freedom of Choice Act controversy, and I wonder, how does that law as teacher of virtue model apply to that, and what lessons do you draw for how the conversation could move forward from that 2007-2008 controversy?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, do you all remember the controversy over the Freedom of Choice Act? All right, the Freedom of Choice Act, the controversy came up in Obama's first presidential election, and I think it might have been the summer of 2007, he spoke before a Planned Parenthood group and said, the first thing I'll do when I'm president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act. And then that was picked up by the, traditional family values people and the Catholic bishops, and saying, oh my God, this is the most radical law in history, and he's going to sign the Freedom of Choice Act. He's the most pro-abortion president in history. Don't vote for him. And it was a big controversy in the Catholic press and actually in a lot of the other press over this. Well, what I did was, when this was all going on, I went and actually printed out the actual bill. And the bill reads, I'm going to be somewhat insulting here, excuse me, but it's true. It reads like it was written like at 2 o'clock in the morning by a bunch of pro-choice activists who, had had one or two beers, maybe too many. And why do I say that? Because if you look at the bill, which is just 4 pages long, I think, it's got all of this. Well, the freedom of choice is the most important, virtue. We've got to protect women's access and women's this, and the right to abortion is really important. We're going to protect this against all encroachment. So you've got the preamble to the law, which goes on for like 3 pages, and then you got and the actual operational provision was like about a paragraph. And we'll change the law to do this. So it wasn't actually a law, as I read it and as I looked into the history, meant to be a law. It was a bill that was proposed as sort of a political statement. And and if you want to see a law that was meant to be a law, that's going to have wide and sweeping effects, take a look at the Affordable Care Act. Over 1,000 pages long. How's it going to change the tax code? How's it going to change the ERISA code? How's it going to change Medicare, Medicaid provisions? How's it going to change, all sorts of things, So that's what a bill that's meant to be operationalized looks like. Very short on, drama, and very long on provisions that make lawyers rich. So I said, well, what is this meant to do? It's meant to be a political statement, and it actually functions really well for both the pro-life community and the pro-choice community, ironically enough, because the pro-choice community hold it up as a rallying cry, and the pro-life people point to it as, kind of a counter-rallying cry. Look how extreme this is. But when you actually try to work out, well, how would it operate? And I did the best I could. I honest to God did. And I couldn't at some points because they were saying, well, it was going to overturn Casey, but it sort of upheld, kind of said nice things about Casey, so it wasn't clear it was going to do that. It presented itself as if it were, kind of not just a statute, but a super statute, almost like a constitutional amendment, but it's just basically another law, even if it's enacted. And a law, you can't make a super law that trumps other laws, so if the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits funding for abortion, is passed after it, or even if it's still online, you've got to reconcile these 2 pieces of legislation, and how would you go about doing that? I thought there were even constitutional problems with it because it could run afoul of the Commerce Clause, and I actually think the constitutional problems are stronger after the opinion in the Affordable Care Act. So I said, doing this isn't a good thing. We ought to learn from this, because your pedagogical function, when you're trying to teach with the law, is actually undermined unless all the other things that Isidore talked about, clearly communicated, suitable to place and time, according to the custom of the country, if all of that is messed up, that's going to inevitably mess up your pedagogical role, because nobody's going to understand what it is you're trying to teach. And the fear of the law exceeding its bounds is going to really create more opposition from the people on the other side. And so I used a piece of pro-choice legislation for that, but the point is general. It would apply to a piece of pro-life legislation or any kind of badly worked out law on any controversial topic.